Ukraine seeks ruinous sanctions on Russia amid European hesitancy. Leave Ukraine April 7. Ukraine wants sanctions that are economically destructive enough for Russia to end its war after accusing some countries of still prioritizing money over punishment for civilian killings that the West condemn as war crimes. The democratic world must reject Russian oil and completely block Russian banks from the international finance system, President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his daily video address early on Thursday. After grisly images of dead civilians in the streets of Bucha sparked international condemnation, Zelensky said Kremlin forces were trying to cover up evidence in atrocities. We have information that the Russian military has changed its tactics and is trying to remove people who have been killed from streets and basements. This is just an attempt to hide the evidence and nothing more, Zelensky said, but did not provide evidence. Moscow has denied targeting civilians and says images of bodies in Bucha were staged to justify more sanctions against Moscow and derail peace talks. Russia's 6-week-long invasion has so far forced over 4 million to flee abroad, killed or injured thousands, left a quarter of the population homeless, turned cities into rubble, and prompted a slew of Western restrictions on Russian elites and their economy. Washington on Wednesday announced measures including sanctions on President Vladimir Putin's 2 adult daughters and Russia's SureBank, and the ban on Americans investing in Russia. The United States also wants Russia expelled from the group of 20 major economies to form and will boycott a number of meetings at the G20 in Indonesia if Russian officials show up. But the head of Ukraine's presidential office, Andriy Yermak, said late on Wednesday that its allies must go further. Sanctions against Russia must be ruinous enough for us to end this terrible war, he said. My goal is to impose an embargo on the supply to Russia of technology, equipment, minerals, and ores, and rare earth dual-use minerals, and thus stop the production of weapons in Russia. Zelensky was earlier critical of some in the West. The only thing that we are lacking is the principled approach of some leaders who still think that war and war crimes are not something as horrific as financial losses, he told Irish lawmakers. European Union diplomats failed to approve new sanctions on Wednesday as technical issues needed to be addressed, including on whether a ban on coal would affect existing contracts, sources said. EU member Hungary said it was prepared to meet a Russian request to pay rubles for its gas, breaking ranks with the rest of the bloc and highlighting the continent's reliance on imports that have held it back from a tougher response on the Kremlin. Some refiners in China, which have close ties to Moscow, are honoring existing Russian oil contracts but avoiding new ones despite steep discounts, heeding Beijing's call for caution as Western sanctions mount against Russia, 6 people told Reuters. Western policymakers have denounced the killings in Bucha as war crimes, and Ukrainian officials say a mass grave by a church there condemned between 150 and 300 bodies. Russia says it is engaged in a special military operation designed to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Ukraine and Western governments reject that as a false pretext for invasion. Russia continues to ready for an attack to gain full control over the eastern breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, as well as the besieged southern port of Mariupol, where tens of thousands are trapped, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said late on Wednesday. Ukrainian authorities say they cannot help people evacuate from the eastern front Ukrainian authorities say they cannot help people evacuate from the eastern front line town of Izium or send humanitarian aid because it is completely under Russian control as the east sees the worst fighting. Many in the eastern town of Derkhaki, just north of Kharkiv and near the border with Russia, have decided to leave while they can. Buildings have been badly damaged by Russian artillery. Kharkiv itself has been hammered by air and rocket strikes from the start. Mykola, a father of two in Derkhaki, who declined to give his surname, said he could hear the thud of bombardments every night, and had been hunkering down with his family in the corridor of their home. "We'll go wherever there are no explosions, where the children won't have to hear them," he said, hugging his young son and struggling to hold back the tears. The new U.S. sanctions hit Russia's Sberbank, which holds 1/3 of Russia's total banking assets, and Alfa Bank, the country's fourth largest financial institution, but energy transactions were exempted, U.S. officials said. The banking sanctions are a direct blow to the Russian population and ordinary citizens, TASS news agency cited Russia's U.S. Ambassador Anatoly Anatov as saying. Britain also froze Sberbank's assets and said it would ban imports of Russian coal by the end of the year. But Europe is walking a tightrope as Russia supplies around 40% of the EU's natural gas consumption, and the bloc also gets 1/3 of its oil imports from Russia, around $700 million per day. Germany, Europe's largest economy, which relies on Russian gas for most of its energy needs, warned that while it supported ending Russian energy imports as soon as possible, it could not do it overnight. Despite the sanctions, the Russian ruble extended recovery gains on Wednesday, returning to levels seen before the invasion, shrugging off fears of a potential default on international debt as it paid dollar bondholders in rubles. Biden administration holds electric vehicle industry meeting with Musk and Barra. Washington, April 6. The Biden administration said senior officials held a meeting Wednesday with major automotive leaders Tesla chief executive Elon Musk and General Motors chief executive Mary Barra to discuss electric vehicles and charging. The Biden administration said in a statement, there was broad consensus that charging stations and vehicles need to be interoperable and provide a seamless user experience, no matter what car you drive or where you charge your EV. Congress last year approved $7.5 billion in government funding for EV charging stations, but legislation has stalled for new tax incentives to purchase and build EVs. Ford Motor Chief Executive Jim Farley and Chrysler parent Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares were among the other auto leaders who took part. Senate confirms Jackson as first black woman on U.S. Supreme Court. Washington, April 7. Ketanji Brown Jackson was confirmed by the Senate on Thursday as the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, in a milestone for the United States and a victory for President Joe Biden, who made good on a campaign promise as he seeks to infuse the federal judiciary with a broader range of backgrounds. The vote to confirm the 51-year-old federal appellate judge to a lifetime job on the nation's top judicial body was 53-47, with 3 Republicans, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney, joining Biden's fellow Democrats. A simple majority was needed as Jackson overcame the Republican opposition in a Supreme Court confirmation process that remains fiercely partisan. Jackson will take the 83-year-old Breyer's place on the liberal bloc of a court with an increasingly assertive 6-3 conservative majority. Breyer is due to serve until the court's current term ends, usually in late June, and Jackson would be formally sworn in after that. Jackson served early in her career as a Supreme Court clerk for Breyer. Democrat Raphael Warnock, one of the Senate's 3 black members, said in debate before the vote, "I'm the father of a young black girl. I know how much it means for Judge Jackson to have navigated the double jeopardy of racism and sexism to now stand in the glory of this moment. Seeing Judge Jackson ascend to the Supreme Court reflects the promise of progress on which our democracy rests. What a great day it is in America." Of the 115 people who have served on the Supreme Court since its 1789 founding, all but 3 have been white. It has had 2 black justices, both men. Clarence Thomas, appointed in 1991 and still serving, and Thurgood Marshall, who retired in 1991 and died in 1993. Current Justice Sonia Sotomayor is the only Hispanic ever to serve on it. Jackson is set to become the 6th woman justice ever. Presidential nominations to the Supreme Court have become a flashpoint in American politics. The court wields great influence in shaping American policy on hot-button issues, including abortion, guns, voting laws, LGBT rights, religious liberty, the death penalty, and race-based practices. Before Jackson joins the bench, the Supreme Court is due to rule in major cases, including one that could overturn the landmark 1973 decision that legitimized abortion nationwide, and another that could expand gun rights. Mitch McConnell, the Senate's top Republican, criticized Jackson in the debate before the vote, calling her the choice of the radical left and saying her disturbing judicial record included injecting personal policy biases in rulings and treating convicted criminals as gently as possible in sentencing. Vice President Kamala Harris, who became the first black woman to hold that post after Biden selected her as his 2020 election running mate, presided over the vote. A Harris spokesperson said the vice president believes Jackson will become an exceptional justice. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer noted the country's legacy of slavery and past struggles to bring rights to women and black Americans, adding, "Today, we are taking a giant, bold, and important step on the well-trodden path toward fulfilling our country's founding promise." Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, the Judiciary Committee chairman, said, "We are beginning to write another chapter in our nation's quest for equal justice under the law, and that chapter begins with 3 letters, KBJ, using her initials." Biden appointed Jackson last year to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit after she spent 8 years as a federal district judge. Like the 3 conservative justices appointed by the Democrat Biden's Republican predecessor Donald Trump, Jackson is young enough to serve for decades in the lifetime job. During her March confirmation hearings, Jackson said what she hopes to bring to the Supreme Court is similar to what the prior 115 justices have delivered, their own life experiences and perspectives. She said hers included time as a federal judge, a court-appointed lawyer for criminal defendants who could not afford an attorney, a member of a federal commission on criminal sentencing, and being a black woman, lucky inheritor of the civil rights dream. Jackson noted that she was born in 1970 in the aftermath of congressional passage of major civil rights laws aimed at curbing discrimination against black people and other minorities, and referenced the fact that her parents had experienced lawful racial segregation firsthand in their hometown of Miami. Biden has aimed to bring more women and minorities and a broader range of backgrounds to the federal judiciary. His appointment of Jackson fulfilled a pledge he made during the 2020 presidential campaign to name a black woman to the Supreme Court. The other women who have served on the Supreme Court include current members Amy Coney Barrett, Elena Kagan, and Sotomayor, the retired Sandra Day O'Connor, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died in 2020. Royal gifts from Japan to Britain go on display in London exhibition. London, April 7. From samurai armor to a folding screen depicting Mount Fuji, dozens of Japanese artifacts from the British Royal Collection go on public display in a new exhibition at the Queen's Gallery near Buckingham Palace. Japan, Courts and Culture, which opens on Friday, features more than 150 items, including gifts from Japanese emperors to Queens Victoria and Elizabeth. Japan, Courts and Culture tells the story of 350 years of artistic and diplomatic exchange between the courts of Britain and Japan. Exhibition curator Rachel Pete told Reuters at a media preview on Thursday. Many of the items were officially diplomatic gifts presented by members of the imperial family, so they have this real courtly provenance and history. Items on show include swords, lacquer cabinets, paintings, and intricate ornaments. Also featured is a gift from Europe from Emperor Hirohito for Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953. Elizabeth, who marks her platinum jubilee this year, received a box decorated with a silver heron in what is described as the first diplomatic gift between the two nations after World War II. The exhibition runs until February 2023. Why the U.S. is targeting Putin's daughters, Katerina and Maria. Washington, April 6. The United States' latest round of sanctions on Russia includes two new targets. Russian President Vladimir Putin's two adult daughters, Katerina and Maria, who U.S. officials believe are hiding Putin's wealth. Putin's daughter, Katerina Vladimirovna Tikhonovna, is a tech executive whose work supports the Russian government and its defense industry, according to details in the U.S. sanctions package announced on Wednesday. His other daughter, Maria Vladimirovna Vorontsova, leads government-funded programs that have received billions of dollars from the Kremlin toward genetics research and are personally overseen by Putin, the United States said. We have reason to believe that Putin and many of his cronies and the oligarchs hide their wealth, hide their assets with family members that place their assets and their wealth in the U.S. financial system and also many other parts of the world, a senior U.S. administration official told reporters. We believe that many of Putin's assets are hidden with family members, and that's why we're targeting them, the official said, speaking on condition of anonymity. Reuters was not immediately able to reach Putin's daughters, their representatives, or the Kremlin for comment. Sanctions announced Wednesday also include the daughter and wife of Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov. The U.S. also banned Americans from investing in Russia and targeted Russian financial institutions and Kremlin officials in response to what President Joe Biden condemned as Russian atrocities in the Ukraine. Russia denies intentionally attacking civilians and says images of bodies in Bucha, north of Kyiv, were staged to justify more sanctions against Moscow. Moscow says it is engaged in a special military operation designed to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Ukraine and Western governments reject that as a false pretext for Russia's invasion. The extent of Putin's wealth is a sensitive subject in Russia. The Kremlin last year denied that he was the owner of an opulent palace at on the Black Sea, as alleged by opposition politician Alexei Navalny in a video that drew a huge audience on YouTube. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said in February that sanctions introduced against Putin himself were pointless. Putin is quite indifferent. The sanctions contain absurd claims about some assets, Peskov said. The president has no assets other than those he has declared. But U.S. lawmakers believe otherwise. Putin and his oligarchs stole their dirty money in rule of law nations by purchasing mansions, mega yachts, artwork, and other high-value assets, U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse said a few weeks ago, while introducing legislation that offered cash rewards for information that leads to the seizure of assets held by sanctioned Russian oligarchs. Putin's daughters, who the U.S. believes help him hide his wealth, have never confirmed publicly the leader is their father, and he has refused to answer questions about them. A Reuters investigation from 2015 detailed the connections and influence Katerina, an acrobatic rock and roll dancer, holds in the next generation of Moscow's elite. Katerina, 29, described herself as the spouse of Kirill Shamalov, son of Nikolai Shamalov, a longtime friend of President Putin, the report said. Shamalov Sr. is a shareholder in Bank Rossiya, which U.S. officials have described as the personal bank of the Russian elite. As husband and wife, Kirill and Katerina had corporate holdings worth about $2 billion, according to estimates provided to Reuters by financial analysts. This was in addition to other property and assets. Putin's elder daughter, Maria, studied biology at St. Petersburg University and medicine at Moscow State University, according to the Reuters investigation. She is also heavily involved in genetic research work, which Putin has in the past described as a field that will determine the future of the whole world. According to Russian and Western media reports, Maria married Dutch businessman Jorrit Justvassen. She was pursuing a biomedical career, specializing in the endocrine system in 2015 as a doctoral candidate at the Endocrinology Research Center in Moscow, and is the co-author of a book about idiopathic stunting in children, the Reuters report said. Her husband used to work for Gazprom Bank, a large lender with strong links to the elite around Putin, the report noted. No estimates were immediately available for their assets and holdings. Congressional Democrats propose new rules on recusal, secrecy for U.S. judges. April 6. Democrats in the U.S. Congress proposed a raft of new rules for the federal judiciary on Wednesday, including a formal mechanism to remove judges from hearing cases in the event of a conflict of interest, and another intended to reduce secret court filings. The legislation was being introduced in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Among its sponsors are House Judicial Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler and Senate Judiciary Committee members Sheldon Whitehouse and Richard Blumenthal. The bill comes as U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has faced calls by some Democrats to recuse himself from any cases involving the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by former President Donald Trump's supporters, citing the activities of the justice's wife, Virginia Thomas, a conservative political activist. Under current practice, the 9 Supreme Court justices individually decide whether to recuse themselves from a case because of a conflict of interest. Under the proposed legislation, the full Supreme Court will be required to review requests for recusal. The proposed legislation also would require all federal judges to announce a compelling reason for sealing any document, and would require that the secrecy would last no longer than necessary. The bill would mandate public notice when a party has requested records to be sealed in a case, and would direct judicial leaders to devise an inexpensive process for someone outside the case to contest a secrecy motion. A spokesperson for the U.S. judiciary did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Reuters revealed in a 2019 series, Hidden Justice, how U.S. judges routinely allow makers of consumer products to file under seal information that is pertinent to public health and safety. The Reuters investigation found that hundreds of thousands of Americans have been killed or seriously injured in recent decades by allegedly defective products, including drugs, cars, and medical devices, while evidence that could have alerted customers and regulators to potential danger remained hidden. Though they are required in most of the regional circuits of the federal judiciary to explain why they allow records to be sealed, judges in cases involving defective products rarely do so, Reuters found. In addition, the legislation would require the Supreme Court to provide live video of its oral arguments on the Internet, as well as other ethics guidelines for judges. The Supreme Court has not allowed video of its arguments, but begun allowing live audio in 2020 at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic and has continued that practice. It is the latest legislation pursued by some Democrats that would make changes in the federal judiciary. Legislation unveiled last year that would expand the U.S. Supreme Court to 13 judges from the current 9 in a bid to erase its current conservative majority drew an unenthusiastic response from the White House and top congressional Democrats and was denounced by Republicans. Jury still deliberating on Michigan Governor Kidnap trial. April 6, Reuters. A federal jury ended the third day of deliberations on Wednesday in the trial of 4 men charged with a plot to kidnap Michigan's governor, a case that highlights the political rift surrounding the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Prosecutors said Adam Fox, Brandon Caserta, Barry Croft Jr., and Daniel Harris planned to snatch Governor Gretchen Whitmer from her vacation home in northern Michigan in the hopes of ending what they perceived to be draconian restrictions championed by the Democrat to control the spread of coronavirus. The defendants had hoped the kidnapping would spark a second American Civil War ahead of the 2020 presidential election as the pandemic exacerbated the country's intense polarization, prosecutors said. During a trial that has lasted nearly a month, defense attorneys argued that FBI informants coerced their clients into discussing the plot. The men never made concrete plans on their own and were victims of entrapment and overreach by the prosecution, their attorneys argued. On Tuesday, during their second day of deliberation in a Grand Rapids court, the 12-person jury asked U.S. District Attorney Judge Robert Junker for transcripts of testimony from the trial. He declined their request, saying the 3,400 pages of transcripts were not yet available and that jurors must rely on their memories, the Detroit Free Press reported. The case has cast a spotlight onto the militant right-wing organizations that have emerged in the years since former President Donald Trump's election in 2016. It also suggests the extent to which the pandemic and government efforts to control it have become a wedge issue in U.S. politics, pushing some people to extremes. All 4 of the defendants have been charged with kidnapping conspiracy. Fox, Croft, and Harris were also charged with conspiring to use a weapon of mass destruction. If convicted, the men could spend the rest of their lives in prison. 2 other men who were initially charged, Ty Garbin and Kalen Franks, struck plea deals and served as star witnesses for the prosecution during the trial. Garbin is currently serving a 6-year sentence, while Franks awaits sentencing. The 4 men on trial, plus Garbin and Franks, are among 13 who were arrested in October 2020 and charged with state or federal crimes in the alleged kidnapping conspiracy. 7 of them are facing charges in state court. The FBI said it had begun tracking the group's movements after seeing online discussions that included posts about the violent overthrow of some state governments. The group's goal was to end curbs on social and business activities imposed during the coronavirus pandemic. Prosecutors have also accused them of wanting to start a second American Civil War, while defense attorneys have said their clients were often high on drugs and prone to crazy talk rather than concrete action. Harris, Caserta, and an undercover informant who testified at the trial were members of the Wolverine Watchmen, a militia group, prosecutors say. Croft and Fox were members of the Three Percenters, a similar far-right organization.